he is leading a rebellion against the Britannian Empire. And even in his helmet, to see that his helmet, that he is, he also has to conceal his identity. And even with these sharp spikes that are all over his helmet, the sharp spikes that are on his cape, even just the design of him, it shows sense of danger, sense of caution, sense of that intrigue that lures you in, and you can't take your eyes away, because you have to keep your eye on something dangerous, but at the same time, this guy has charisma. So that's the whole thing, charisma. And here's the thing too, speaking of color, now purple and gold, or violet and yellow, are complementary colors on the color wheel, meaning that they stand directly opposite to each other on the color wheel. So if let's pretend I had a color wheel right here. These two colors, now these are, let me see, I will say this is more of like a dark mid-tone of purple, whereas this is definitely more on the lines of a desaturated yellowish orange. But still, if we were to basically go to the more saturated version of these colors, it's going to be a purple and a yellow color, and that's another thing that helps add interest, the color theory, to his wardrobe and design. All right, so moving on to the next image. This one right here, this is once again, so like I said before in the previous section, or from the previous image, about breaking down his design and his suit. But going back to the idea of focal points. The focal point, I'd care to wager, is his face right here. And what leads me to that is because his cape basically is giving away the whole game. Now, this kind of points over here, but you can't get over here without stop to think right over here. And even elements of his cape. Now some points of his cape point away, and that's just really the design of the cape. But there's too many arrows in a way that come from his cape that point, at least in this quadrant of the illustration. Now, as far as the image goes overall, so we're going to talk about the composition of the image. So once again, we see colors of purples, bluish, blue indigo, some desaturation, and then we see the contrast of the yellows, yellowish orange, sun setting over here. So once again, going into the complementary colors, you have your purples, your yellows, your oranges, and all that stuff. Color harmony is a very, very big thing when you're coming up with a composition. It's something that I still struggle with to this day, and that's one of the many things I'm still working on to be better as an artist. But like I said, that's why I'm making these design videos. Like getting these colors, seeing how they lay down, it honestly, your eyes are not at a loss to see what you're focusing at because of just how the colors work. Everything works in harmony, and it's a really great illustration. And the thing is, with a lot of these pros, they break some of these classic rules because they know what the rules are, but they still have to follow these rules to a degree. Not rules, excuse me, it's more like guidelines. These are just things that have worked through centuries of artists figuring out what attracts people's eye and attention and what just looks good. Once again, this red, I love this red under this cape, because even though this is just what I'm getting from when you're using complementary colors. Once again, complementary colors are colors that you find directly opposite on the color wheel. So to show you so if you go to Windows, Extensions, Adobe Color Themes, now mine's gonna probably take its good old sweet time loading up. So when you're working with colors that are directly opposite on the color wheel, sometimes it will help, or at least I want to say sometimes, I'm noticing that it helps to throw in another color to kind of like break up the obvious that, oh, these things are on the color wheel. So it doesn't take your attention, so it doesn't say, oh, exactly. So let's go to, let's see. So right here, where it says complementary. So even if I drag this over here, so right here, we see the purples or the violets, and we see the yellows. But like I said, so this red that is close to this purple is a great way to break up the obvious complementariness of the color schemes. I'm probably talked enough about that, so I'm just gonna move on. So as far as these background elements, and this background, and I love this background because the story behind this background looks like there is obvious destruction along this cityscape, and the sun, we see the sun back here is setting, and Lelouch, who is in the foreground, who's smugly looking back. Once again, telling the story by using these elements, his facial expressions, to show that, ha, I did some shit and I'm not apologizing for it. But to show that he might be very well responsible for all this destruction, especially because we see this building leaning over. Buildings don't lean over like that. See some decay here. And the thing is, not to go all over the place, but there's not a whole lot of super detailed stuff in the background. Just enough information to say, hey, this is a city, these are buildings, and they're kind of in bad shape. This is not the focal point of the piece. Once again, the focal point is right here, this character, Lelouch, who is in the foreground. These are just the background dancers of the performance that is this piece. But the sunset kind of shows that the sun is setting on an old world and he is ushering in a new world. Once again, going to that anarchy type of character, leader of the rebellion, trying to bring about a new world order. And something to notice, we have a canted angle in the background just to add intrigue. Can you imagine this background image if it was the angle was more horizontal, just straightforward? It kind of throws off that interest. So this just makes these little details to make your piece that much more interesting is going to be the difference between a hobbyist and a professional. And trust and believe, guys, this is a professional piece. And like I said, just letting you guys know, this is what the pros are thinking of when they come up with these things. Can you imagine whoever drew this, came up with this piece, probably had to go through a couple dozen of thumbnail images just to communicate this orchestra of illustration and composition pieces. Now we're going to move on to my favorite piece. This right here. So this is my favorite because back when I was dating my third ex-girlfriend, now my third ex-girlfriend, but back when we were living together, she had this really dope wall scroll, and when we moved into Memphis, the wall scroll was over the TV, and for the longest time, at this point, I hadn't seen Code Geass, didn't know anything about it, and this wall scroll has been in my face the entire time. And then I actually saw it, and now I will say I was a little disappointed by the anime, only because the anime doesn't actually have swords. Like, this was so misleading because I love sword type animes. I love the sword fighting. Bleach was one of my favorite animes, and I really thought that this was going to be that kind of anime, and it wasn't. But the anime is great, don't get me wrong. It's just I had a little bit of failed expectations because, you know, but when I actually looked at this, what the story that was I feel like this piece tells the greatest story. Because we see here, so there's a lot of stuff going on with this, a lot of really dope design elements that if you aren't paying attention, or if you're paying attention, you can definitely pick up on. So we see the colors of the red and the blue, and a lot of times in anime, a lot of the characters who are either red or orange character base colors and the blue or purple character base colors, you have the main character who's the protagonist, and you have he's not by definition he's the antagonist, because the antagonist goes against the progress of the protagonist. Not always the major villain, not always the big boss, but still basically a foil character. Exactly, a foil, his equal opposite, where he is strong in a lot of things, he might be weak in, but he makes up for it in his own way. So let's get down to, first things first, let's get down to these swords. So this sword right here is a very decorative sword. Notice the jewel, notice the fine design on this handle right here. I sound like I'm trying to sell you guys something. And this little like chain right here. This is not a sword that's fit for battle. This is more of a sword that an army rallies behind when the commander waves his sword for either a charge or to show victory. This is a sword that's more of an icon or a call to battle. Now Suzaku's sword is a more practical sword. His is a katana, definitely has we see the strap right here, is battle ready. It's not as nice because he is the actual general. He is on the battlefield doing the fighting. Now Lelouch actually gets his hands dirty, but he's more of the commander. He only comes in to when his army had done all the hard work, but he is the brains behind the operation. Once again, if you haven't watched the anime, I don't know what the hell you're doing watching this video, because I'm giving away a bunch of spoilers. So once again, we have a canted angle, so I can draw a line from this corner to this corner. And this is basically your eye. Even if your eye goes from this corner to this corner, you have to run into the main focal piece right here. And so this is basically like arrows pointing down to this focal point. So this is a great example of a focal point. But even the alley, so we have the cracked window in the back. We have the fire staircase. We have some boxes in the background. This is a very dingy looking alley. This looks like this is the alley. This is also, but it communicates what these characters are about that life. We see this low angle shot. So basically the camera is looking up at them while they're looking. Now Suzaku, he's more or less looking down. While Lelouch is looking more kind of like out. He's looking, you know, his head is down, but he's looking like he's looking for the next fight. He's looking for the next opponent. Suzaku is more like looking away. But we do see that these guys are, like I said, they're about that life. They know that they're ready for any type of fight that comes their way, and they are cocky enough, they are confident enough that they can win that fight. Now we have a little sun flare right here just to add a little extra flare to the image. It definitely helps with the lighting. So we see this is, you know, the light areas that hit. So we know where that light source is coming from. And we know that where the light is not hitting, these larger areas. And then we have these rose petal things to really like tie the piece together. Kind of like brings a halo around the focal point. Once again, to lock in onto these characters. So like I said, this is my favorite so far. In conclusion, guys, make sure that you are, when you're designing anything, use repeated shapes to sell the harmony in the composition. Watch how you're using your colors. Brush up on color theory and using contrasting colors. Contrasting color, our eyes are drawn to contrast, especially. Not one color is more superior than the other, but both colors working in tandem just makes the piece that much better. The idea of shape language, using those sharp edges. In particular, in this particular anime, they use a lot of like sharp, triangular, lanky type of character design, but that all is used to communicate the style and tell the story. Focal point. I've probably said focal point a dozen times in this, but swear to you guys, even in a messy composition and a, you know, complicated, there is a focal point. Depending on what the artist wants to do, if they want to make it obvious, even if they want to make it subtle, there is a focal point. And using cinematography elements, how to stage your composition, low angle, high angle, bird's eye view, worm's eye view, establishing shot, all those things, especially if you are making a comic or a manga, these things will serve you well. All in all, when you're making a design, you're basically making something that is going to tell a story. All the four images that I showed you, all of these images you can derive a story from. These are not just bland, you know, generic. Yeah, a lot of people who aren't really interested in anime, they might say, oh, that looks cool, and they might move on. But when you actually take a look at anything, not even just these Code Geass images, but at anything, even the Mona Lisa, every piece of art, or at least it should, tell a story. So that's it for this video, guys. So what do you think? Were there any design details that I missed in my analysis? Did my analysis hit the nail right on the head? Let me know in the comment section below. My goal is to help you to develop a critical eye for analysis so that you can see where things work in certain designs, where they don't work, and how can you make that your own. If you learned something about design, or if you like the sound of my voice for some goddamn reason, like the video and subscribe. I'm going to be coming out with more videos as soon as I can. But yeah, there's going to be more coming from this channel. Until the next time, guys, deuces.